The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth. Hi everyone, you're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. Today we're discussing The Rings of Power, Episode 5, called Partings. I'm Thomas Sanjurjo, and joining me today are Thomas Salerno. Hey Thomas.
Hey everybody.
And Jeff Haecker. Hi Jeff.
Hey Thomas.
And Kaitlyn Facista. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going all right. It's good to have you guys. I'm super excited to talk about this episode. I've got some crazy wild theories to throw at you, so we'll see. We will get into it. Be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app that you use. And find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can find us on Twitter also, where we're at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we're at StarQuest Network. And definitely share the show with somebody who likes Tolkien, who's watching the show, who you have brought up the names on the show with, and you are geeking out about it and you want them to listen. Share it. That's how we get, that's really how we get the spread of the podcast best. We have had some great feedback from you guys too, and I really appreciate that everybody's kind of like jumping in on this one. This is even when I was doing the Secrets of Star Wars, we didn't get this much feedback. So like the fact that we're like getting like 2 or 3 people talking to us every episode, that's super awesome. So we're either doing something really right or something really wrong. I don't know. You take your pick. But we did get two pieces of feedback this time. Tammy LML says on YouTube, I believe it was, I really just wanted to say that I'm loving the podcast. Every time I listen, it makes me want to go back and rewatch the episodes for all the things I missed the first time. A couple of things I'm thinking. I keep wondering if the Tower of Ostirith is the tower where the orcs took Frodo after Shelob wrapped him up. So it's an interesting thought. Yeah. And so she says she needs to reread the books, but she thought that the tower had been built there by the elves to keep an eye on Mordor. And I think like all of us, she's kind of getting the sequence of things mixed up because we don't really know how it all falls together. So, maybe there's some questions there. And then she also says, I hate to say this, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm leaning more towards Halbrand being Sauron. For the first couple of episodes, she wondered if he could be related to the future Rohirrim. But 2 things struck her in this last episode. He's definitely shown a mercenary side, not only in the fight with the guildsmen, but also in his original situation on the wrecked ship. He was quite quick to abandon the people he was with. And the other trait he's showing is charm. He knows how to ingratiate himself with the queen and court, and that's something that Sauron was really good at. He's been subtly manipulating the people around him, including Galadriel, and he doesn't want to leave Numenor. And while it seems to be an obviously nicer way of life than what the Middle Earth have, it would also place him at the side of Pharazôn potentially if the Queen Regent sails off with Galadriel. So she says that I'm gonna hurry and read some more of the books. Thanks for a great episode. What do you guys think? I don't know. I am not on the fence about Halbrand anymore. I'm pretty sure he's not Sauron.
Yeah,
I think I agree. I think this episode especially kind of shows that, because you see him not really acting. When he's alone, he's still acting like Halbrand. If they never showed him alone, I could definitely still see him in the running. But I think we see him on his own, kind of in the room by himself, and he's not getting, twirling his mustache or anything. He's looking like he's, thinking hard about what the issue was in that scene. So at least for me, I think that's some evidence. And I think we can get more into it, but I think he's definitely someone else that is a famous king in the Tolkien lore. So,
all right.
Yeah, he's definitely king of somewhere, but I don't think he's Sauron.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think especially how this episode ends, I think kind of convinced me that like, okay, that earlier stuff was more of like red herrings to throw us off the scent. I think we've said this on previous episodes that a lot of us aren't sure if we've even really seen Sauron yet.
Right. I think even this episode, I think we still have not seen Sauron.
I agree.
I think it might be one of those, like the very final episode of the season, he's revealed, and maybe not even like shown, but just, oh yeah, he's been there the whole time.
I think so. And they're going to need some kind of a hook to get us hyped for season 2. And I mean, what better hook than a Sauron reveal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where my money's going. But I really like the idea of Ostirith being the tower that the orcs took Frodo after Shelob wrapped him up. That's a good thought.
Yeah, I actually saw on the X-ray, like the trivia section on Amazon Prime, about that tower, because I thought it had been built by the elves, but it was actually built by the men who had sworn allegiance to Morgoth, like way back in the day. And then the elves took it over after that, is what it said on Amazon Prime.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but this episode kind of ends with the implication that this tower might end up being destroyed in the next couple episodes, either by the orcs or by the people there themselves, because they seem to be getting some ideas of how they can get some environmental kills using this tower.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's positioned perfectly for that kind of thing, you know? Top of a large hill.
Yeah.
All right, so we have one more piece of feedback. Paul Leon on YouTube also writes, I read a theory that Halbrand is the heir to the throne of the people who become the Oathbreakers of the White Mountains. I think that fits well with your ideas about him not quite achieving redemption. He's one of my favorite characters at the moment, at any rate. It doesn't perhaps fit with Adar being familiar with Beleriand, but I think it'd be interesting if he was one of the Avari, bitter about the Eldar abandoning his people and thus falling in with Morgoth and then possibly Sauron. As far as the Palantir goes, he wonders if Anarion was on the other end. He also puts forth the idea that Ostirith means fortress of guard, Ost plus Tirith. So he's liking the episode still of the podcast and can't wait for another one.
Awesome.
So yeah, those are good. I think I'm kind of leaning that way with Adar as well, of him being one of the Avari who fell in with Morgoth, because there were a few that did that early on. And so, you know, it would make sense. But they were never turned to the orcs. It seems like that was a separate group that was maybe tortured and turned into orcs. All right. So that is where we're at. Now, before we get into talking about the show itself, I wanted to talk about the intro, because I've been meaning to do this both times we've had our episode since. And, I'm gonna throw it out to you guys. I want to ask your opinions of the intro. So we're talking about the music scene before any of the stuff starts, where, you know, there's some action and then there's like there's that music scene with all of the like kernels of chaff kind of moving around, or dirt. You're not really sure exactly what it is, but they're all moving around in sync with the musical waves. How do you guys feel about the intro that they have on this show?
It's okay. I kind of wish they had gone with that initial teaser where it was the melting metal that ends up creating the Lord of the Rings logo. Like, I wish that was the intro to the show instead of this thing with the little kernels of sand. It's too abstract for me to get, you know, too excited about.
Yeah, I feel like that intro with the forging was at least 100 times cooler than the current one. And so for them to introduce, like, when they dropped that was when I started getting really excited about the show, because it was all done with practical effects and it was just so cool. And for them to never use it again, like, what was the point of that?
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
And then like, this one is cool because I heard that it was kind of supposed to be influenced by the music of the Ainur, or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I like it a little bit more after hearing about the intention behind it. But just as it stands on its own, I was really underwhelmed. And it kind of followed the pattern of a lot of TV shows where the intro is just a bunch of little abstract things happening over some kind of boring music. So
they did that with Wheel of Time too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Wheel of Time was just like stuff being woven, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So I was just
I really like that one too. I like this one, and I like the Wheel of Time one because it's all about the pattern of creation. That's the whole concept of the Wheel of Time, is about the weaving of the pattern. That's kind of the background of the books. And so I liked the way they fit that together. And I like this one for a similar reason. So.
Well, I'm glad
Jeff,
you like it. That makes me very happy to know that someone likes it.
Maybe I'll help you guys like reframe it, and it'll help. Like it'll help you like it. I'm not a huge fan of the music, to be honest, but I do really like what they've done with the creative aspect of it.
I
Jeff,
kind of like the music. It's also a Howard Shore, I think, who did the music for the original trilogy. So
I just feel like they were, if the Game of Thrones is kind of their like primary competition, and the Game of Thrones soundtrack is so catchy, this one, it just doesn't, it feels like they weren't trying that hard to me. Like I really like it in its own special way, but it's just not like, it's not the kind of thing that gets you really like amped up and hyped up for the show, or that you get kind of stuck in your head. But I also really appreciate it that you guys like it too, because it makes me feel better that, you know, it's some of these things are just not for me, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the way. Not everything's going to work for everybody. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like it for two reasons. One, it's kind of that cool, I don't know if they did it with practical effects. It doesn't look like, I'm debating a lot, because knowing what I know about computer graphics, it's very hard to do this in computer graphics and make it look decent. And so I'm wondering if they took one of those plates and just played sound waves into it and had the sound waves move into certain things. Which then leads me to the other reason that it's grown on me a lot, and I've really enjoyed watching it the more I've seen it, because it's like the Song of Creation in the Tolkien Legendarium. And I'm going to butcher this word because I've read it only and never actually heard it spoken. The Ainulinde. Is that how? I don't know. Do you guys know how to say it?
The Ainulinde?
The Ainulinde.
Yeah, Ainulinde, yeah.
Okay. That's how we're going to... I've never actually heard it spoken. So there you go.
Oh.
So it's the Song of Creation is being presented here. And if you listen to the music and the way the music plays, everything's going really well. It's all very harmonious. It's all very nice. But as soon as the orchestration moves into the words, that's when you get that trail of black moving in through the stuff that exists. And so it's like Morgoth trying to play his own tune. And
the discord. Yeah.
And the discord that gets built into it. But then it all builds back together at the end into something that's still beautiful. So it's very much like the Song of Creation, kind of playing all together into this neat moment. And I really, for me, that's what, the more I've been watching it, the more I've been kind of replaying that in my head and thinking about it that way. So yeah, it's grown on me.
Yeah. once I read about that, I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I accept it. I like it. It's cool. But I just feel like the other one was just so much cooler in my mind. So it was hard to come from.
I'm not gonna argue with that. That was
from the
good.
like molten metal being poured, into like little bits of sand moving around. But they're both really special in their own way.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when Game of Thrones is your competition, that intro was so iconic. Just the building of the empire kind of in front of you unfolding it was a very neat intro. So yeah, well, we'll see. And maybe they'll change it. Maybe it'll be one of those things that we get a new one each season as they go along. That could be kind of cool too. Alrighty. So let's dive in. We open this week with the Harfoots again. So we have Nori and Meteor Man talking, and it's kind of fun. I love him saying trying to say the Great Migration.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, he said, so yeah, that's, and the way that she's teaching him to speak, I think is really neat, because she's kind of teaching him how to be as well as how to speak, so he recognizes that he is peril, but then she says, no, you're good because you're trying to help. And so she's kind of retraining the way he thinks about things. And then we get the beautiful song from Poppy as they're leaving that first scene where Poppy starts singing the traveling song that starts off very world expanding, and then it also builds into that one line that I think it should stick with everybody if they've watched any Lord of the Rings, which is not all who wonder or wander are lost. And I love that that's kind of tied into this whole thing.
I also thought it was cute that was her mom's walking song. Someone mentioned it. They're like, why don't you sing your mom's walking song? And, we all know she doesn't have her mom with her anymore. So I think that added a layer of sweetness to it.
Yeah, I thought it was a neat montage. I liked, how it just showed them going through all kinds of different environments. And what I'm pretty sure will eventually become the Dead Marshes. They were called the Gray Marshes on the map, but I'm I'm sure those eventually become that. And we see them going farther and farther south. So I think that's how the Harfoot story is going to eventually intersect with the Southland stuff, because it looks like they're heading in that general direction.
That's going to be very bad for them.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, with this one, with their migration, I was wondering if this is kind of evidence that there's different timelines going on, because it seems like there's some changing of the seasons a little bit, and they're going pretty far on foot and pushing these carts, and it seems like the other parts of the story are progressing faster. So I think I said it a 1 or 2 episodes ago that there might be some shifting timelines. So and I do have some speculation about that as we get into it, but it's so I wonder if that's just more evidence of that, and then we'll maybe it'll all meet together by the end of the season, just because sailing to Middle Earth could take a little bit of time. I don't know the mileage of the Numenor to Middle Earth offhand, but so maybe that's how they'll kind of catch it all up together. So
yeah, I have a lot of theories about that, and I'm going to save them for later when they become a little more relevant. But yes, I agree. This seems to indicate that there is a different timeline to this particular piece of the story, at the very least, than the other pieces that we have. So yeah, I agree. And then we get the interesting aside of these new figures that are introduced. 3 white cloaked figures that show up at the Meteor Man's fall site. And we know nothing about these figures. No, go ahead. Yeah, did you get their names? Because I know there's the one's called the Dweller.
Yeah, the Dweller. So it's the Nomad, the Ascetic, and the Dweller. And the Dweller was the one that was had a shaved head and was leaning down into the pit and was kind of looking up and further, up and with kind of an angry look. So that was the Dweller.
That's our.
And the other two, I'd have to see.
Yeah,
I'd have to see the picture side by side.
Yes. There needs to be a definite Eminem reference there somewhere.
She's the one that he or she. It's hard to say. Is the one. Yeah, the one who looks like Eminem.
I like how those names. They really remind me of Skeksis names from the Dark Crystal, where they're just very simple, and it describes a character trait. The Nomad. I forget the other two. But yeah, it's I caught that right away. I'm like, they're like humanoid Skeksis, maybe.
Yeah, they have these weird artifacts they're carrying with them. The Ascetic is carrying this thing that you would think is a shield, but is not carrying it like a shield at all. It's just this big circular moon sort of looking thing.
Tray, maybe?
Yeah. I don't know. It's so weird. It's just bizarre. And it comes out of nowhere where it's like, okay, we just got done with this adorable scene with Nori and the Meteor Man, and then we immediately move over to this really bizarre scene with Dar and the Orc, and it just kind of fell right in the middle of those things. And it's like, okay, so now we've got this whole other plot line that we're going to be paying attention to as well.
As if we don't have enough characters already.
I know.
Right, yeah.
We don't. See, they're not killing them off as fast as George Martin does in his books, though. So, we're just going to end up with, 40 characters to juggle, and they're not going to murder them the way
in that case, it will be more like Wheel of Time, where there's a million characters.
And which one of them is Sauron?
All of
We're
them.
still wondering. Still don't know.
I worry about this. I was just thinking about it, everything's going so well right now. Nobody's died yet. Nobody really too important. And then I of course remembered how everything is going to end. And man, I feel like the heartbreak of losing these characters after they're going to be around for some time is going to be even worse than with Game of Thrones, where everyone dies off pretty quickly. I feel like it's going to be so much more drawn out and just devastating when it does happen.
Or when they don't die and they just make the wrong choice, like that's going to be
make the wrong choice and then they live forever as a Nazgul.
Yeah.
Oh no.
or under the mountain.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's even worse, maybe.
Yep. So I don't know. It's hard. And like, especially the characters that I like, because the dwarves by far and away are my favorite part of the show. Durin is just a riot. I loved that whole scene with the table. We'll get to it, but that's probably my favorite scene from the whole series so far. Absolutely great.
But it's like, like Revenge of the Sith. You know what's coming.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to be bad and that people are going to die. And you're just bracing yourself for this.
I don't know if I really want to like them, but I do.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I can only attach myself to Elrond and Galadriel. I know they're going to be okay.
Because they make it.
They make it. I know they're in the Lord of the Rings. They're going to make it.
So we get this weird scene with Adar and the orc where Adar's kind of like standing in the sun, and he one of his orc captains comes up to him and he pulls him out and tells him to hold out his arm, and the orc just does it, like, and the orc's skin starts like crackling and burning, and there were like great sounds. Just really, if you could see the expression on my face, the word great and the expression on my face do not go together for what was happening to that orc's arm. But I don't know. I mean, this scene was interesting because I think it really shows the difference between how the elves view themselves and what this character thinks of the orcs, because he seems to have compassion for them in a bizarre sort of way. And, but then also the plan is to get rid of the sun so that they can have their own place, their own place to live. So it's really interesting to like kind of see the dichotomy of what he's going through with all of this.
And it's kind of like a loss for him too, because he's thinking about how much he's going to miss the feel of the sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like he's making this sacrifice for the orcs who he seems to love with this kind of weird fatherly affection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So
we go back over to Ostirith, and we have Bronwyn give her speech to try and rally the last of the Southlanders together. She does a good job. Like, it's a solid speech. She doesn't have much to offer them, but it feels like everybody's on board. And then Waldrick steps forward and says, I don't care what you can say for our ancestors, but they lived.
And I was like, lived as slaves, I guess. I mean, if you call that living, I suppose. I mean, I was just like, okay, Waldrick, whatever.
And like, Waldrick is already a super old man. So like, how much longer is he really going to live? And like, when you're getting towards the end of your life, like, are you sure you want to, like, I feel like when you're younger, you're maybe more willing to make a trade for your life because you have so much more ahead of you. But like, he's like at the end of it and he's still willing to, he's got like 10 years maximum. I don't know. Like, it seems wild to me. Like, I can't imagine being like, yes, I need these last couple years of my life and I'm willing to do anything for it. Like, it's just crazy.
Unless he thinks Sauron can give him extended life somehow.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, I wonder if that's what, like, he thinks, he's chasing some, extending his life, like you said. So
he's like taking on the role of the Numenorian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they've kind of like, they've bought into these legends, right? And so apparently there's some sort of religious cult aspect to the way that he thinks about Sauron and the reason that he held on to that sword. And now that we find out a little bit more about it finally in the coming scenes.
Yeah, I wonder if when he says our ancestors, they lived, like, I wonder if he's meaning like maybe they did kind of receive some kind of extended life. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Does Sauron have the ability to offer, or did Morgoth possibly have the ability to offer something similar to what the Numenorians received from the Valar? It would make sense.
Well, when
So-
Sauron gives that, when he creates the Nazgul, I mean, their life is extended. So I could see, as he's kind of tinkering around with his magic, he could probably have come up with something, similar.
Or maybe Waldrick thinks the sword is kind of the key to his extending his life.
Right. Yeah.
Although he didn't try to take it from Theo, but the sword is still in play. So
Yeah, for sure.
So next we move to the story from Numenor, where Isildur is not chosen for the expedition, and he's upset about it. And he goes and has an argument with his father. And I love the discussion between them here. I feel like it's really like, that the difference between lip service and true service, where not always is, well, I want to do something great for this cause that I believe in, but actually just doing the day-to-day work that is required and that's true service, and that one is worth more than the other, because without the little things, the big things never have a chance to get done, because nobody's actually bothering to do the little things.
Yeah, that was just a great scene. Like, and I just love Elendil in this show. He's great.
Mm-hmm.
He's exactly pretty much what I imagined Elendil to be like. He's noble, courageous. He's a decent man, a decent father to his kids. And I'm just like, yeah, I could see this being a guy who thousands of years later, his name is still used as a battle cry by his descendants,
Mm-hmm. I like that idea too that you mentioned before about kind of the difference between trying to do one great heroic deed and many small kind of day-to-day acts, because I feel like that's so Catholic, and it's just like the path to holiness doesn't usually require, like, it's just like your day-to-day small acts. And that's also very Tolkien, that brings you towards your goal. And it's the small things that lead to what you really need to be getting towards.
Yeah, that we can do no great things, but only small things with great love.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Saint Therese quote. So I love that. I love that philosophy. And I love that philosophy just in day-to-day life too. That's one of the things that I try and tell my kids. It's like, it doesn't matter what you do, just do it well. You pay attention to what you're doing, stay focused on it, do it well. And if you do it well in the small things, you're going to make a big impact. And then this is the one. So this is the point at which we get to the talking about the split of time. And this is where I noticed it, and I felt like it was really interesting. We get this map scene with Halbrand, and it's this very short thing where he walks in and he starts talking to the queen, and Pharazôn and Galadriel are all there. And the queen is asking him, where did they move next? And he points out that they moved to Ostirith at that point. And that struck me because, like, is he able to predict what's happening? How does he know what's going on? Unless the story that we're getting with Arondir and the Ostirith group and Bronwyn and that whole group is an older story that happened when Halbrand was a child. And that's how that's going to fall out, is that because he talks to Galadriel about fighting with the orcs, and how she doesn't know the things he had to do to survive. And, that it's not very long ago that my people were fighting alongside the orcs, which to him, this would have been a thousand years ago, right? If it was the first age that he's talking about, it would have been 1,000 years ago. So I feel like there's something going on here that we're going to get some more information about. But I don't know. That's my theory, is that the story of Arondir and the Ostirith group is actually from Halbrand's childhood. And we're going to find out that he's in that group and has grown up and now is where he is.
Yeah. And one of my friends, she was saying she thinks, she was speculating that maybe the Theo's friend, I don't have the name, maybe that's Halbrand.
Rowan.
Rowan,
There you
yeah.
go.
So that could be Halbrand as a child, but I don't know if it quite adds up, because at least we haven't seen Rowan being the king or the son of a leader or anything, unless there's something that we see where his father gets crowned as a king, and then to extend that, maybe Halbrand, like maybe his dad is being evil, following the orcs and Adar, and he kills him, and he has to run away from his own kind of the ones who swore to Adar, and he's fleeing from them, and that's when we see him. We run into him in the ocean.
I thought I remember from either the first or second episode. It was the first appearance of Arondir, where the elves in the tower mentioned they're being pulled out because the war's over. And so I thought that lined up with like Galadriel and the others being sent back to Valinor, because like Gil-galad gives a speech and he's like, the last vestiges of the war are over. So like, well, I think there is some timey-wimey stuff going on. I don't know if it's decades or centuries though. I think it might be weeks or months that are being compressed and moved about here.
I personally don't feel like the audience could handle like I feel like we are already so confused about the timeline that if they were to try and pull some kind of like, actually these are alternate timelines, I just don't think we could handle it, and I don't feel like it would go over very well. There's also the part when Halbrand is talking about they went to Ostirith, and he says something like, I forget what exactly he said, but he's like, they went south to Ostirith, I should reckon, or I suppose, or something. And that made me think, did he give them the orders to go that way? Or was he there when they received their orders to go that way? I kind of think that the way that they lined up him kind of reminiscing about what he did, I'm guessing that he had to do something similar to what Waldreg did, and that maybe he killed his father, who had the little necklace, and in order to make a blood oath. That's kind of what I'm guessing. But I think he definitely killed somebody. I just don't know who.
I mean, as we keep saying, he said he took it off a dead man.
Mm-hmm.
So, he a person he may have killed. So yeah, that's where
I'm going with it.
Yeah, and at some point he learned how to smith. So at some point, presumably before he was, on the water, he was, because I'm not a blacksmith, but I'm assuming it takes a number of years before you can, especially to forge a Numenor, who are noted craftsmen, to impress someone there. So he had to have some period of his life where he was practicing, that kind of a craft. So, we need more of his story. And, I don't know that we'll get as much of it this season leading up to the finale, because since we only have 3 left, but hopefully in the future, we'll kind of get some more of his, backstory, an episode of him smithing, or, being taken in by some smith in the wilderness or something like that. And, before he, goes along his way.
He was also very good when he flipped, like when there was that sword on the ground and he like kicked it and flipped it into the air. Like, I feel like that it was kind of trying to lead us towards the idea that he's been trained in swordsmanship, which is something that like maybe a prince or some kind of royalty, or at least someone of high stature, would have been trained in.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot there to him. And I feel like I would love to see him be, maybe with his father, they were captives of elves to keep them from rallying the Southlanders back to, their regal banner. And then they, from there, are captured by orcs and have to, so there's a lot of room to make some really interesting storylines for him there.
That would make him also more of like the anti-Aragorn that they're kind of trying to set him up as, or like a parallel, because like if you were to imagine him kind of raised by elves in a similar way that Aragorn is, that would be really interesting.
Yeah. And that would give him the craftsmanship and things like that. So it could be, really, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where that ends up going to be. I'm like you, Jeff. I want more of his backstory. And then like, there's only 3 episodes left. We need to get something done here. But at the same time, linger a little bit, please.
Yeah, I think we need a whole episode that's just called Halbrand, and it's just him for the whole time, whole hour and 10 minutes.
Oh man, yep. So we go back to the Harfoots, and they are attacked by wolves. Now, if anyone who's unfamiliar, I know, right? If anyone, and I think this is where we need to qualify some stuff, right? So when we're talking about Tolkien, there are some terms that will come up, and I imagine that they're going to come up more frequently as we get into some more things. Tolkien used the term werewolf, warg, and wolf, all a little bit interchangeably. The werewolves specifically were not werewolves the way we think of them, like with the shape-shifting idea of like being able to move from a human to being a wolf and back. So a werewolf was just a wolf that could talk, or like a wolf that had man speech or the ability to communicate. So if you think more like an intelligent wolf, basically, that was what a werewolf was. Then the wargs were like wolves on steroids, like the kind of like a wolf hyena, but bigger and nastier and meaner. And then these things, I guess, are what they're calling wolves, but like, you know, they're just big mean wolves. So I don't know, where do you guys feel like these things fit into that whole like spectrum of what it could be in Tolkien lore?
I heard a theory that they're werewolves, and specifically this theory had to do with the three mysterious women, because as this went, there were three of them, and they're sort of tracking the Harfoots because they saw the Harfoot footprints next to Meteor Man's crater, and then all of a sudden these three wolves show up, and so maybe there's maybe these three mysterious women are werewolves and can shapeshift into wolves, but that it sounds kind of far-fetched to me, but who knows at this point.
Yeah, well, we did see the wolf in the first episode when we first saw the Harfoots. So
that's true.
We saw at least one of them. I'm assuming they're part of the same group, and so I don't know that they were necessarily. Maybe they were following similar signs that the Harfoots are. That definitely could be, and it somehow led them to where Meteor Man crashes. But then it seems like the if they're the same, it seems they must have, you know, they have Game of Thrones style teleportation where they can get really far really fast, because they went from where Meteor Man
when
was.
You first introduced to him. Yeah, when you first introduced to him, they're all up on the cliff, and then next thing you know, the Dweller is down at the bottom of the cliff, and it's like an immediate transition. So maybe they do.
I like the werewolf theory, even if it's maybe not the most plausible. I think it's the most fun. Yeah. And I would love to see them bring in more of aspects of the Silmarillion, because like we have Wolf Sauron and we have Finrod with the werewolves. So I would be very happy if they kind of were able to bring that into this story somehow.
At first, I wondered if they were actually like wild boars or something, because they looked more porcine to me than wolf-like. It was just very confusing. I'm like, why call it a wolf? Give it a different name. You know, like there's in the Lord of the Rings video games, they couldn't use wargs for some reason, so they have these big monstrous animals that they call caragors. And it fits, you know, like they look, you know, like they could be in the Peter Jackson movies. So like I'm not averse to them inventing creatures if they need to. So I was just confused why they just call them just wolves, as if they're like normal wolves, because they don't look anything like normal wolves.
It could just be that the Harfoots are calling them that because maybe they're not that familiar with the Encyclopedia of Animals or something.
I'm with that. I buy that. Like the Harfoot's like, it's a wolf. It's a wolf. It's got teeth. It's got four legs.
It's not a dog.
It's gonna eat you. Like who cares what you call it? It's a wolf. Just run away. But then we get this really cool scene with Meteor Man, and he fends off, like he picks one of the wolves up and just chucks it bodily away from the group of the Harfoots that he's defending, and then he slams his hand on the ground and just casts this sort of spell. I don't know, and it throws all of them back and scares them enough that they run away. And in the process, I think this is the really cool thing, and this is what I want to see more of. The magic has a cost. And so they've mentioned that already in this series, that, you know, the creating something has a cost, and in this case, it's no different. There's a cost to his using the magic. So we saw with the fireflies. We see now with his hand when he hits it into the ground, it's all bruised. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I almost, so you say bruised, but I almost wonder if it was maybe almost burned in a way, which I could be wrong, but I believe the Dweller, when you see her bending over the Meteor Man's pit or crater, her fingers have some, I think, blackness on them too. I'd have to go back and look again, but
yeah, they do.
Maybe it's a sign that they're, magic users of some sort. Okay. Yeah, so maybe they're maybe some kind of Maiar or dark version of Astari or something like that. Some kind of twisted, Astari or something.
Sounds good. So then we go to the blade training scene, which I thought was really fun.
I liked that scene. I saw some people complaining about it. Oh, it's a trope. And I'm like, lighten up. It was fun. I really liked it.
I think if there's one thing you cannot pin on this Galadriel, it's being a Mary Sue, because that's what you often get with the female lead character. There's the complaint that she's a Mary Sue, she's good at everything. Blah, blah, blah. This Galadriel is not good at much, but she's really good at fighting.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who thought this scene was really goofy. So I'm once again very happy to know that you guys enjoyed it, because I can.
It was goofy, but I liked it anyway.
I am so over this. Oh no, these people don't know how to use their swords. Oh, this expert has to come in and teach them. And after 30 seconds, now everyone is well trained and like every if one of them were to miss with their swords, like Galadriel would have got her head chopped off.
Yeah.
Or like what are you gonna? It's just
fighting with live swords. Yeah, no.
It's just the whole thing feels silly, and I'm not into it. But I'm very happy for everyone who is.
I like this kind of stuff. Now, I will say I would love it if movies would stop having people train with live blades. Nobody in the history of ever has ever done that. Just no.
It's extremely high stakes there. Like what?
Yeah.
If all of your soldiers are getting injured.
Yeah. Well, and even if it's not high stakes, it's bad practice, because if your sword is live, you're sitting there, you're nicking your sword the whole time. You're purposefully parrying someone else's blade. It's like you're ruining the blade. And yeah, you have to go back and sharpen it afterwards, but it causes the blade to be ruined. You only ever drew a sword to actually like stab somebody. That was your intention, was to murder somebody with that blade when you pulled it out. Other than that, they would use, sometimes they would use hardened weapons, but not the actual weapon that you were going to use. And it would have been very obviously a training blade, or they would have used wooden weapons.
They never heard of kendo, I guess.
Right? Like that's how you train. It's just what everybody that's everything in the history of ever. That's what they did.
Well, Numenor's is special.
Well. So, Kaitlyn, I'm 100% with you. I like the scene, but I did think it was very goofy too.
I'm glad they didn't. I thought for a second they were going this way, that they were going to have Halbrand come in and say, give me a turn, and he was gonna nick her, and now he's a lieutenant on a Sildar or on a Olympian ship. So I'm glad they didn't go that way. I'm glad they.
I also thought they were going to have Isildur jump in. Like, I'm not even on the Sea Guard, but let me give it a try too. And then
that was
he
his
wins
way
his
of getting
place.
back on the ship.
Yeah, so they definitely avoided these two really cringy moments, so that's good.
At least there's that.
Yes, could have been worse.
Well, and I do like the fact that, like, with no prompting whatsoever, Elendil's like, yeah, she's going to be able to hold her own against all of them, right? And then gives them the incentive of, you get a promotion if you can touch her with your blade.
Didn't he say it was like to first blood?
It was the first one of you who can touch her. That's it.
He hasn't seen her with the sword before.
No, he hasn't. Like, no indication that she's going to be able to do this.
Yeah, it would make sense though for him, because he's an elf friend, so he would have had grown up hearing legends of the prowess of elves and the martial prowess, and whereas most Numenorians who are anti-elf would have heard, they would have said, oh, that's exaggeration, elves are they're just like us, we can kill them just as easily or whatever. So that's at least my headcanon, is that he, just from his having the positive view of the elves and actually knowing the history versus the the twisted version that most of Numenor has probably gotten, that he knew that she would be fine. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it worked out in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. It's there to be a fun scene. That's the intention of it, was to be goofy and fun and show us that, you know, Galadriel can hold her own just fine.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the times we can forget how lighthearted Tolkien can be.
Mhm.
And then if you just open up the Lord of the Rings, like almost any chapter, you're going to have kind of like a nice lighthearted moment, especially when it comes to hobbits and elves too. So it's always good when they throw stuff like this in. It's not all super serious all the time.
Right. But we are framing this against two sort of super serious scenes where we get Pharazôn and his son Kemen speaking, and Pharazôn reveals his intention with agreeing to this whole process of going to war. And that, you know, I love the way they frame this too, though, because they frame it here by saying it's all about swimming against the tide, right? That's his kind of his whole framing of the statement. You know, you're trying to swim against the tide. You don't understand it. You might be carried out by the tide. You need to know how to do the two things. And then Kemen he's telling him, look, wouldn't it be great to have a man that owes us? And then what ends up happening is later on, Kemen is brought out of the water by Isildur, his life saved.
Oh,
and now he owes something to someone. And so he completely, like, I love the way that was framed. That was really good writing. And I liked the way that pulled together.
I like that it sort of tied into something I said last week, which is that we're going to see the beginnings of Numenor's colonial adventure in Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
When he's like, oh, we're going to get ores, we're going to get lumber, we're going to get land, we're going to get all this stuff. And I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, yeah, that now you can see kind of where it's like he's going to run into problems with Sauron because they both can't be Lord of the Earth. You know, they both want that top spot of like ruling Middle Earth, and there can only be one.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how they're going to do this. I'm glad it finally seems like it's starting to happen. It's interesting that it's kind of like the Númenóreans are coming as conquerors and saviors at the same time, whereas in the books it happens in different times, but you can really see the time compression at work here. But I thought Pharazôn was just incredible. Like for a second there, I thought he was gonna like kill Kemen when the way he looked at him. I was like, oh, I know this guy's your dad, but you are still in danger.
Well, and he has all the servants leave. He like just glances around and everybody leaves the room. Yeah.
So he's got a very mafia boss kind of style.
And they did mention that Pharazôn and Muriel are cousins, which I thought they were going to paper over, but they didn't.
No, they're leaving it in. And we get the warning from Tar Palantir here that he tells Muriel not to go because the only thing that awaits her in Middle Earth is darkness. So that's we're seeing more of the prophecy. I like the way they play with prophecy in this one too. We have the scene where Meteor Man heals himself at the pool with ice, which was interesting to me. I thought that was a strange turn of things. Yeah,
it reminded me of playing like Kingdom Hearts or something. I'm like, oh, so he cast Firaga and Cura at the same time. I'm like, okay.
Well, I think it's setting it up like another red herring where like going back to the first episode where Galadriel's her soldiers are going into the ice fortress and she's saying it's, there's no hint of warmth because it's so evil. So it's like, I think the show is very much trying to scream at us, look, this is very similar. This is the same thing. And so they're definitely throwing the red herrings at us. And I still don't think he is Sauron or Sauron. I don't think that at all.
No, yeah.
I'm
they're like trying to fool us, I guess. And maybe if you haven't really read. Yeah, I think, So I did see something interesting that I can't remember the name of the Maiar, but there was someone pointed out there was a Maiar who is the Maiar who's the moon spirit, basically. And they were kind of speculating that there's some similarity, and there's not much. I can't remember the name of it's like Huion or something.
Tilion?
Yeah, something like that. I'd have to,
The one who
probably
guides
know
the
more than I
moon?
do. Yeah, I think so. And they were just
Yeah,
saying that there's some
Tilion.
similarities. Okay.
I feel like I feel like isn't he still up there guiding the moon? So would the moon fall down if he wasn't?
Right.
I don't know how that would work.
We haven't
No,
seen
I don't
the
know.
moon
Yeah,
much.
it's just something I saw that was.
Yeah, while we weren't watching, the moon fell down.
Just it's gone.
That's really interesting.
Majora's Mask action.
No, see, this this is where Bilbo's "Man in the Moon" song comes from. The man in the moon came down, like.
There
I
you
heard
go.
that people were speculating about if this is the man in the moon and this is where the rhyme comes from.
Could be. They've got a lot to play with. I'm really and they've done a good job of keeping their hands very close to their chest on all of it. So that's good. So we get the next couple of scenes are back to Elrond's story, and I have to say Gil-galad is a jerk. I just he is. I mean, just total like there's nothing about this scene that makes me think, yeah, that's the guy that I want to be the king of the elves, right? Like he's awful. And so the only redeeming part of this whole series of scenes is Durin getting the table and the position he puts them in to get the table it's just with a straight face. So well done. I love that scene, and that really, to me, it tells you everything you need to know about Durin, really.
Dwarves know how to get what they want.
Yep.
I also love that he's doing it for his wife. Like,
yes.
He's such a wife guy.
Mm-hmm.
Disa said she wanted a table.
Although I thought maybe Gil-galad was just kind of, I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of standard Noldor. He's like being insulting and high-handed, but it's just off-putting kind of, because I'm like, we're supposed to be, by the end of this show, hopefully, we're supposed to be rooting for this guy, because like there's a lament named in this guy's honor, right? So like, Gil-galad was an elven king and all that stuff. And so I'm like, I'm not very sympathetic to this guy. So hopefully we see a bit of character growth in him over the course of this series.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I think I'm trying to reframe the elves, and I'm trying to think about them in the way that you would think about like a human trying to be diplomatic with animals that they consider pets, right? And because that's the only way I can frame this, because there's a complete lack of empathy and consideration amongst all the elves, except for perhaps Elrond and his friendship with Durin. And even then, he's like been absent from the guy's life for years and still wants to call him a friend, which I get that. But, like that's the only way you can think about it. Is like, okay, we've got these people who are going to be around for another 100 years maybe, and I'm going to be around for another few thousand. And I'm trying to make a deal with them. It's like, I don't have enough time to wait on their timeline because they're going to die before I can get any of this stuff done. And that's like the only way I can think of the elves, because they seem like they're rushing everything, but at the same time, like don't care about actually learning anything about the people that they're trying to make diplomatic solutions with. So we get this interesting scene with the roots of Hithlager, where he's talking about the Misty Mountains, the roots of the Misty Mountains. And I don't know about you guys, but I loved this story in the sense of the way you write about prophecy and not knowing how a prophecy is going to be fulfilled. Because if you just take the elf character in this and replace it with Gandalf, you have the exact same legend where they have this epic battle trying to defend the root of the greatness, the seed, the growing seed of the next generation. And lightning strikes, they're cast down to the bottom of the earth, and then one rises with the light of the Silmaril back to life and to guide the end of the age. And so the two are like the same legend, and they even call Gandalf by several names that are very much like Mithril, right? Where they're very much like the glowing, that they have this kind of inner light sense to them when they arrive. Yeah, Mithrandir. Yeah. And it's very similar to the concepts that are going on. So I was struck by that. Like listening to that prophecy, I was like, maybe they've got it wrong. Maybe they don't, maybe they're this whole like metachlorian version of
yeah, I was calling it mithril chlorians. Yeah.
It's like this I don't know what's the classic trope. It's not the Maltese Falcon. There's like another thing that you call it, the thing that everybody wants, and it's really unobtainable.
A MacGuffin?
Monkeys.
The MacGuffin.
Monkeys
that's it. Yeah, it's a MacGuffin. No, yes, okay. It's like this weird MacGuffin that they're looking for, and I don't know. I don't really buy how this is going to work. Like, even if they get their hands on a whole bunch of mithril, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, the whole thing to me was very upsetting and baffling. Just like from looking at it from Tolkien, it doesn't make any sense. And then looking at it in like, even if you try and separate it as its own thing, it still doesn't make sense to me. I've been mad about it for like 4 days now. I'm trying to be calm and to tell myself everything's going to be okay. And they're going to, resolve this all and it'll make total sense in the next 3 episodes. But it's just, I feel like this is the biggest deviation that they've made so far that it's very hard to go along with, even though I've been talking to people about it. I've been listening to podcasts. I've been like, please make this make sense. But it just irks me. I don't know.
Okay. I've a crazy theory. I think that this whole incident with this story about the roots of Hithyglir, and then this idea that like the elves are somehow dying off with this blight and they need the mithril to cure them. I started to suspect on my second watch through that this whole thing is proof that Sauron is already at work among the elves. I don't think we can trust any of this stuff. I think that all of this may be misdirection. That's just what my gut is telling me. I mean, Elrond calls the story. He almost kind of directs us into thinking that we shouldn't trust it because he says it's a dubious legend of like, that most consider apocryphal. And so that kind of clued me in. I'm like, okay, we don't need to take this literally. And this whole idea that they need to be mining all of this mithril and doing all this stuff, I'm like, well, I think Gandalf mentions once that Sauron really covets mithril. So I'm like, I wonder if Sauron is already at work. We haven't seen him yet. Nobody's mentioned him, but that he's manipulating Gil-galad and Celebrimbor to be doing this stuff. And somehow it will all work out for his benefit. I don't know if I'm on the right track here, but that's kind of how I rationalized all of this.
I agree. I think that's, I hope so.
I think that's where they're going. But then the fact that Elrond already knew the myth, it kind of made it out to seem like this is something he learned as a child. And like, oh, every elven person knows this old tale. So that is weird to me because it's obviously not true. Like we know what happened to the Silmarils. None of them are in a tree. Yet why would there be this myth that's been kind of passed down from who knows when that everyone is familiar with? Like that, it's kind of where they lost me with the whole, this is Sauron excuse. Like I just still, it's just hard for me to get past it.
It's definitely the most controversial aspect of the episode.
I did like the legend though, not necessarily where they went with it and that they need it to, saturate themselves. But I did like that they had a legend or an explanation of where mithril came from, because a lot of the Silmarillion, as we know, it's kind of it's a collection of legends kind of explaining the world, because Tolkien, first and foremost, besides being a linguist, was steeped in mythology and steeped in fairy stories. So I think I just like even if hopefully we they don't go too far into this where they keep talking about how if they don't get mithril they'll fade away, but I did at least like the legend of it.
Yeah,
The
I thought
imagery
the
was
legend
really
was really
cool.
cool.
Oh yeah, that was cool. I was a little bit disappointed that I wanted the Balrog to be more different from the Peter Jackson one. And I thought it still looked kind of too similar. I'm like, from the way the Balrog's described in the book, you could have some really like unsettling and like eerie imagery. But I felt they just kind of they wanted people to recognize the Balrog right away. Yeah. So they went with the more Peter Jackson kind of looking monster.
It seems like this show is really meant for fans of Peter Jackson.
Yes.
Almost more than fans of Tolkien books. Like there are so many callbacks where it's a line that's almost verbatim from Peter Jackson's movies, but we don't get a lot of lines straight from the books, which is weird to me, but it's also visually similar. Like we have, what we think is Narsil looks just like it does in the other movies. And then the Balrogs look very similar. So it's like for fans of Peter Jackson, you're going to love the Rings of Power.
I agree. And I will get to in a moment one area where I think they really fell short on the writing as it compares to Tolkien. And I'll bring that up. But, we talk, I think the other one we have to deal with here is Isildur. Man, he's a weasel. Like he's just, it's hard to like him because he's so ingratiating and very obviously using his friends. Like, I don't even know why these guys like him. They're like they knew what he was going to do. They knew he was going to come back and apologize and try and get on the boat. He doesn't even apologize.
No. Yeah. And then when him and Kemen are telling their story, my brother and I were like, oh, well, they couldn't have possibly believed that. So they must have just let Isildur come on the mission because they felt sorry for him.
Yeah. Right.
He's such a terrible liar.
He's young, though. He's like, probably like 20-ish or something.
Yeah. 18, 19, somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, and on the boat, don't they say he's not a sailor per se. He's assigned to the cavalry. And I mean, I know they were playing it for comedy that he was going to be the, scooping up the horse droppings, but it is interesting that in this talented sailor that they're potentially saying you're not going to be in command of any sailing. You're a grunt, or you're going to be, not even involved in the sailing of the ship. You're going to be dealing with the horses, which on a long boat ride, that's probably not going to be a fun job, but
he totally deserved it though. After everything he's done, like
he does,
even to get a spot on the boat, he didn't necessarily deserve that. So I was glad that they at least gave him, like, we all wanted him on the boat because we want his story to continue. But I didn't want him to, it almost felt like maybe he was blackmailing Kemen. Like, I saw you about to burn down the boat, so get me a spot on this boat kind of thing.
Which is possible. But like I said, Kemen owes him.
Yeah, but then it's Kemen's worth versus Isildur's word. And
yeah,
that's true. All right. So we come back to the scene where Celebrimbor has tested the mithril. And he has a discussion with Elrond, and this is one that really bothered me, and it bothered me as we were watching it, because not only are the king and the whole group asking Elrond to betray another of his friends, but then he tells the story of Elrond's father, and he says that Arundel had said that he needed to go to the Valinor to speak with them. And when his wife asked him, why must it be him? He responded, and they missed the Tolkien response here, because the Tolkien response would have been very different than what he says, which is, well, I'm the only one that can do it. That's the response that he gives, essentially. And that's not a Tolkien thing to say, right? That's I'm the one skilled enough to do this. I'm the one to take it. That's not how it works. What he should have said is, if not me, then who? Right. And that's it would have fit so much more better with the lore of who that character is, of who all of these characters are, and would have fit with that moment, like at Elrond's council when everybody's like staring at the ring and trying to figure out who's going to take it to Mordor and who stands up. But, you know, the Hobbit and says, I'll do it.
I think Eärendil even says something about how it's his fate to do this. And when the show is trying to go so hard towards this idea of fate, to miss an opportunity like that to bring in fate was just like, why? Just kind of another letdown.
I don't know.
I feel like I'm being so negative. I really like the show.
I don't think you're being negative at all.
Yeah. Okay. I think this was just one of those moments where I was like, that's not. Yeah. I missed it.
It was also so manipulative exactly right. too. Like when he did that, I was like, man, this Celebrimbor, like he is a jerk. He's playing off of every one of Elrond's weaknesses to try and get him to do, and he's being so manipulative, and like that's his character, I think. So he's doing a good job of acting there, but it really makes you just so irritated.
Right.
Well, and if we think that Sauron is they're manipulating Celebrimbor, it's just kind of a trickle down effect of Celebrimbor is Sauron saying we need this, or Anatar, whatever role he's playing, is saying you need this mithril, you need this, and so Celebrimbor is he's been swayed a little bit and is trickling that down to Elrond, and Elrond is begrudgingly trickling it down to Durin.
And I mean everybody's getting played, right? I think that's kind of how it goes. So we finally see Halbrand step into his role as king, and we get this very clear picture of him as the anti-Aragorn, right? He looks like spitting image of Aragorn on the horse riding through town. And I also like in the scene that we finally get we get a sense of Galadriel and what her problem is. And this is something that my wife and I are still in discussions about, like whether or not this kind of redeems her, where she really is this ball of just fight. Like that's what she wants to do. That's what she's built on right now. And my wife's like, it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't fit the whole character that we know Galadriel to be. And I'm like, well, maybe that's the whole point, is that, an elf lives for so long that they are very filled with a passion and it lasts for a very long time for them. And so something big has to happen to kind of knock her out of it. And that's what we're going to see over the course of the series. Jeff, you were going to say something?
Oh, we were talking about how this is kind of a lot of fan service or a lot of callbacks to the Lord of the Rings films, and the scene where they were traveling on horseback through the streets, that definitely reminded me of the scene in Return of, and I'll disclaim, I've seen the films more than I've read the books. I do love both, but the films I saw them, when I was in high school, and I've watched them probably almost every year, and I really enjoy them, even though they're not, it's not a perfect adaptation. But this scene was definitely reminiscent of the scene in Return of the King where Faramir and they're going to retake Osgiliath, kind of riding through the streets, the people all turning out, except this was this was turned on its head. It's not a mournful type of thing. It's a joyous thing. We're celebrating these people, and we're all happy and joyful. So I just was pointing that out since we were talking about that earlier.
And then the last couple of things that we get tie-ups on are we see Waldrig's group, and we hear a little bit more from the Bronwyn and Arondir thing, where we learn about the statue of the sacrifice with the sword. And then we also see Waldrig and his group going to Adar, and what that ends up being, that there has to be a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, to make the pact.
I love when he kind of figures out that Adar is not Sauron, and he's like, I'll serve you then, whoever you are. And that made me laugh.
So I thought this was interesting because at first I was like, oh, okay, so he's not Sauron. But then upon thinking about it more, like so Sauron doesn't like to be called Sauron because it's like a mean, it means like stinky guy, like filthy, dirty, stinky man. And so is he upset because he's not Sauron, or is he upset because Waldreg just called him, you know, a stinky guy or whatever? So now I'm like back to, is he Sauron? And I still don't think he is, but that like caused me to pause for a moment. Just like his reaction. You're like, is he not? I don't know.
Or he's just like, you know, you called our master the name he's not supposed to be called.
Yeah,
so.
that too.
Yep.
I think the name Sauron, especially because the name that he's used to going by is something that's so like endearing. And so even just hearing the name Sauron, it could be his master, that he doesn't like to hear, or it could be something that people call him that he doesn't like, or it could be that he hates Sauron because he's his rival, or like I love it because it added so much more. Where I was immediately like, oh, it's not Sauron, to then straight back to, wait, is he Sauron?
Yep. And then we get the orcs all marching off, chanting Nampat, which there's just so much debate about what this word means. Which I love. That's very Tolkien. Like, words mean things, so it doesn't seem like they just picked it randomly. They've used it a few times now, and it sounds like we're going to get more indication of what it might mean as we go on. And then I think my favorite scene in the whole episode is the scene between Elrond and Durin that we get towards the end here, where Durin reveals that he was joking, and he just wanted a table for Disa and saw an opportunity to take it. And I love how much Aule is mentioned throughout this episode. There's a lot of mentions of it. And the last one here is just by Aule's beard, but there is a lot of talk of Aule over the course of the interactions that people are having with Durin. And then I think my favorite part of this one is the relationship that these two have, and hearkening back to the door to the Mines of Moria that's cast with mithril, right? It's like this version of mithril that they can cast into these sigils on the doors and things. And how simple it would have been for Gil-galad just to have told Elrond what they were thinking, and for him to have gone to Durin and just asked about it. Because that's kind of where they get to at the end. Like, there was all of this mess, and all he really had to do was just say, hey, we're having this problem. We think there might be a solution here. Can we work are you willing to help us? And Durin's like, yeah. But I love how he makes him say, whose hands are it's the fate of the elves in?
Yeah, that was a cute scene. I like their friendship a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I love how Elrond's like, you need to tell Disa the table's a gift from me. That was brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah. And he was like,
my only
well,
requirement.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's so great to see the simplicity of their friendship, and that becomes the moniker for Moria, right? For the door is like, speak, friend, and enter. And what did you have to do? Just speak the word friend. Literally, that's it. That's how easy this riddle is.
I was so surprised that Durin wasn't more mad about it. I really, especially after we saw how angry he got at his father the last episode, it felt a little bit like, wait, what? You're not super, super mad right now? Like, maybe their friendship is just so strong.
Which is even better. And it just makes me dislike Gil-galad so much more. Like, what a jerk.
I hope we get like some good scenes with Gil-galad soon, because before the show started, I thought that I was like, this guy is going to be my favorite. And he is the character who I'm most annoyed with most of the time.
Yeah, him and Galadriel, between the two of them, it's like they have no diplomatic bone in their body, either of them.
We need a little kind of likability here.
Again, I think leaning more into Peter Jackson's elves than Tolkien's elves. That kind of high level of arrogance, like
very much so.
I think that's why everyone likes Arondir so much, because he's so elvish, but he's also so humble, and like he's willing to put himself on the line for men, and I don't really see any of the other elves doing that too much.
I like the point that he makes, right? Where it's like in all of the time that I spent listening to the whispers and looking at the knives, I learned to appreciate the mouths that were speaking them and the hands that were holding them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah, I really like him. I think he's probably one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, it's like he has sight of what the elves' relationship could be to men and could be to the rest of Middle Earth, and Elrond's kind of there too, because eventually we obviously know his son-in-law is a man, and his daughter will become man in the sense of becoming human. So, but all the other elves seem very much, we're better than everyone else, and at least the ones we've seen. Now, I'm sure there's some that are, your good elf as well, but yeah, it's nice to see Arondir kind of being a friend, so we kind of get that juxtaposition with the speak friend and enter. He's being the friend.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Any final thoughts? Anything we missed talking about?
Nothing we missed, but I did want to bring up just a little bit of speculation. I think we're in the course of the rest of the season, and as we go along, we're going to see Halbrand and Isildur kind of become best friends, which I think I agree that Halbrand is the king of the Oathbreakers, and we know that the king of the Oathbreakers swore an oath to Isildur. So I think we're kind of going to get their friendship building up, and then something's going to happen, and we're just going to see, it's just going to be an all-around tragedy of of the oath breaking and then Isildur's fall. It's just going to be, it's going to be a lot of tragedy. So, but I think really they're kind of going to set up that they're kind of going to become, because they're kind of both outsiders at this point on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Isildur's he's the son of the boss, but he's also alienated his friends, and then everyone else is probably going to kind of treat him as you're not one of the crew. You're here because of your dad, and so he and Halbrand and Halbrand's kind of an outsider. So I think we're going to kind of see them develop into a friendship.
I like
that was
idea.
The only thing I had to say.
Yeah, I bet they're probably going to be hanging out like in the stables or something. That would be kind of cool. I it's going to be kind of a long boat ride, like we talked about. So I bet we'll get to see a lot of characters interacting and becoming closer and seeing friendships develop. That would be really cool.
Yeah, because I don't think he's going to hang out with Galadriel quite as much.
Better not.
Yeah, and I just love the scene of the ships sailing out of Numenor. Just beautifully shot. The music just, it was great.
That's it from us. We would like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Middle-earth, including Kimberly W., Frank R., Mary Jean C., Toby T., and Lynn F. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them at sqpn.com/give. We'd love to hear what you think of the Rings of Power. As you can see, we are reading the comments that we're getting. You can either comment on YouTube, that's where we're getting a lot of the comments, or you can join us on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or you can email us directly middleearth@sqpn.com. We also have a Discord channel, lots of good activity going on there, lots of really interesting in-depth discussions, especially right after the show comes out. If you are, we like to we have two channels for Middle-earth. We have one that's the Middle-earth channel and one that's the Middle-earth spoilers channel. So stay out of the spoilers channel if you haven't watched this week's episode yet, because you will spoil things for yourself if you go in there too soon. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 6th episode. Until then, Kaitlyn, thank you for joining me for The Secrets of Middle-earth.
Thanks for having me.
And Jeff, thank you as well.
Thank you, Thomas.
And Thomas Salerno, it was great having you.
Thanks so much.
And once again, I'm Thomas Sanjurjo. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy, The Catholics of Oz. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Oz.